welcome to Bangladesh Feminist Oral History Project. This is our very first episode in a series dedicated to preserving and amplifying the voices of feminists in Bangladesh. My name is Tanveer Anoy, and I'm thrilled to host today's conversation. Bangladesh Feminist Archives, which powers this project, is an archive that documents the rich intersectional histories of feminist movements in Bangladesh. Through this series, we aim to bring you the stories of individuals who have shaped and continue to shape feminist advocacy in our country. We are honored to speak with Hana Shams Ahmed for our first episode. Hana is a feminist academic and advocate whose work centers on the Bangladeshi state's relationship with marginalized communities, particularly in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. Her dedication to amplifying voices, addressing systemic inequalities, and advancing rights-based advocacy has been transformative. Let's dive into her journey then. Hannah, let's begin by learning more about you. Can you tell us about your journey, how you moved from journalism to advocacy and then to academia?
Well, first of all, thank you, Anoy, for inviting me to this oral history project. I think this is such an important project, and I'm very, very honored to be part of it. So in terms of, so we're talking about the personal journey here. So um, I think for a lot of us women, and I think the feminist journey is very, very personal. I think it begins with, it's very, actually very difficult to explain how, you know, I, I come to this point from childhood to here. So I'll start with certain things that happened in my life that kind of shaped who I am today. And I think that's kind of what you asked me. Um, the first thing I think I would say is like, um, you know, when you learn how to be feminist through your family first. So, and it's not always a very pleasant journey to get to that point. So, obviously, when I was a child, I don't really know what feminism means. The word has no meaning to me. No one is telling me about these things, but I do experience certain things that change the way I think. So, I think for me, I grew up in, first of all, in Libya when I was a small child, but I went to Bangladesh when I was about 9 years old, and things were very different in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. I was living in Iqbal Road, Mohammadpur when I got there. And I went to school, and suddenly my life had changed, and the social context in which I was growing up, so I'm talking about the late 80s and early 90s. Um, at that time, the political situation is very important in how it, I think, shaped a lot of us who grew up at that time. Being from a kind of a middle class family, um, um, I grew up with my brother. My brother is like 2 years older than me, and he was able to go out of the house, go out and play. And I was just 2 years younger than him, but I couldn't go out on my own. I couldn't do things on my own, and I had to stay at home all the time. And, my parents are trying to protect me, obviously, because we know what the situation is like, was like, and still is. So that was, I think, the source of the first rage. Like, how is it that my brother gets to go out, gets to do this? And the thing is, my brother had a band, and so he used to play in his band and do these shows everywhere else outside. I also learned how to sing. The harmonium on the harmonium, but as soon as I had the opportunity to sing in public, my mother said, no, no, you cannot sing in public. you know Practice your music at home all you want, but that's it, you stay at home. So for me, I think staying at home, kind of locked up at home, really led me into reading. So reading books became a kind of escape for me, reading and then writing about my own feelings. So I was going into the lives of all these people. So a lot of fiction of very different genres. And so I think that led to my love for reading and writing, because that was my escape. So, because at that age, what else do you do? You don't even have, like, you probably weren't even born at that time, but so there was only one BTV channel, so there was no entertainment, right? There's nothing. You just sit and stare at the wall or you read something. So that was really important. And, as a child, like Eid and all these things are very important. That's the one time, okay, we get to go out and have fun. So and I think going to these public places during Eid and then before Eid and really brought us, a lot of us, face to face with what sexual harassment was in public. And I think that was a big kind of learning curve for us. Um, so for me, going to Newmarket before Eid was this amazing, amazing thing that I got to do. But at the same time, you go to Newmarket and you will be groped. Whether you're 10 years old or 15 years old, you will get groped, and you don't tell your parents that, because if you tell your parents, that's it. From next year, you're not going to Newmarket again. So you learn to internalize that shame, that this violence that is done to you. And it becomes so normalized that you expect it. You know this is going to happen, but you're going, and it will happen and it will be over. So, and then we had no ways of kind of dealing with those things, but it kind of piles up inside you as a form of anger. So I think as a child, um, that was a very defining factor. And again, I have no idea what feminism is at this point. Still, I just know that a wrong is being done, and I like I'm being told in all possible ways that it is my fault, that I need to be careful. So it really shapes how what you become. So so that was childhood, kind of the definition of childhood for many of us. Um, and then in terms of um, like my mom also suffered a lot because she basically dedicated her whole life to raising the family. She learned how, she got this teaching training, but then my father said that no, you cannot work. So she just stopped. So you learn a lot of things that way. I was really excited when my mom was doing that course that she would become a teacher, because I'm a student at that point. I was like, oh, my mom's going to become a teacher. But then you learn, okay, she can't become a teacher because my father just said that she cannot. And you learn things that way. So I learned, okay, you must listen to your husband because he decides kind of your fate. Um, and I kind of repeated that in my own life. So when I got married, my in-laws told me that I wasn't allowed to work. At that time, I was working. And they said, if you want to get married, then you have to leave your job. So I left my job. I wasn't too young at that point. I was 25, but still, you learn those things as a child and you don't have any other ways of, any other examples. So I left my job. It wasn't until like I had my child, and my son was like 8 months at that time, and I knew I was kind of going out of my mind. So at that time, I had worked before in the Daily Star. So my kind of personal journey of writing led me to Daily Star, and I was working there from 2000, the year 2000. So just after my A levels. And it was amazing. The workplace was amazing. So I was working with the Star Weekend magazine, so writing stories every week. That was amazing. Um, but but then I had to stop at one point. So yeah, so going back to that, so my son was 8 months old, and I just realized I was going out of my mind. So I was still living in my in-laws' place at the time, and then I decided, no, I'm just gonna work. And I spoke to my boss at the Star magazine, Asha Mehreen Amin. She was amazing. She said, "Oh, just come over." So she said, "Oh, I know you have a small child, so obviously you can't work a lot. So just come 3 days a week." And I just started working. And my in-laws still didn't know I was working. I would secretly leave the house. And this is, we're living in the same apartment. So I told my then husband that I'm just going to work. So I started working 3 days a week at the Star magazine once again. Um, and that was really amazing for me, that because in a professional environment you don't usually get those kinds of, like, okay, what, you're going to work for 3 days, why should I take you when I can hire someone who will work full time for 5 days? But I was so blessed at that time that Ashapa understood my situation and said, just work for 3 days, whatever. I understand you have a child, and you can't always come, but just start working. It'll be good for you. So, so that was kind of my journey of becoming a feminist.
Mhm.
um, so it took a long time, I think, to even learn those things. Um, so then I was working with the Daily Star a little bit more every kind of month, increasing my involvement. Um, so while I was working with the Daily Star, um, this was my first cover story. So before that I hadn't done any solo cover stories for the magazine. I think it was 2007. So I was working on this cover story on these two little girls who were working at a house. So they were domestic workers at this house, and they had jumped from the rooftop. And one of them had died, and the other, Madhobi, I can't remember her last name, Madhobi Maji, I think, Madhobi Maji, who had survived, but had broken her leg. So I did a cover story on her, but also like the abuse of domestic workers, especially children. So that was my first cover story. And this was somewhere around 2007. So at that time, then I after doing that story really, I think, um, was picked up by a lot of people, like, wow, this is barbarous, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's obviously happening in our society all the time, domestic workers being abused, but I think that story, sometimes one story comes out and people start talking about it, so that really, I think, um, made quite um, lot of people aware about these issues suddenly. And at that time, uh, the Drishtipat, so Drishtipat was an organization at that time. It was a human rights organization, but also had a writers collective. They were members were all from different countries, Bangladeshis living abroad, basically. So diaspora Bangladeshis. Um, and a number of them contacted me and wanted to know more about Madhobi, but also, wanted to follow up on the story and all that. Um, so I think that was the first time I kind of realized, okay, journalism is such important work. Like, we can really talk about the issues of faced by women, girls in our society. Um, so that kind of gave me kind of a further awareness of these issues, and um, so that was very uh, a very important part of the work. Um, and then so yeah, so that was something. And 2000, so this is 2007, 2008. This is the caretaker government, military-backed caretaker government is in power. Things are looking really bad, and um, my colleague Tasnim Khalil, at the time he was working at the Daily Star, he was picked up and tortured. So that became a big story. And at that time also, I was doing a story about Chole Srichil, the indigenous rights activist, land rights activist, not from the Chittagong Hill Tracts, from Madhupur. So I did a story on him. That was also picked up by Drishtipat. And then I did a further article about Choles Ritual. The second article, actually, I think this may have been after Tasneem was picked up or something like that. And Mahfuz Anam, the editor of the Daily Star, basically said, we shouldn't give your name in this article. We don't want to get you into trouble. So that's when I kind of, oh, okay, writing about things is also dangerous, I guess. Um, um, so, for those who don't know about the story about Choles Richel, he was a land rights activist, forest rights activist, and he was brutally murdered by the military at the time, and basically his body was just left there. So, and then so all of these things are happening at that time, and I'm also working with Drishtipat colleagues, and um, just after the Choles Richel incident, another incident happened in, I think this is 2008, in Chittagong Hill Tracts and Sajek in the area. Like about 70 homes of indigenous people were burned down. And the military was right there. So there was a military checkpost right there, and it was burned down. The homes were burned down right in front of them, and they basically did nothing about it. So that was another story that I worked on at the time. And it's right after that. Um, at that time, 2008 is when the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission started working. So they were going to go on a mission, and they were going to go to Sajek and some other places. And they had these international members as well. So at that time, I was asked if I wanted to be a translator for the international members. So I went. And honestly, before 2008, I even, I was working as a journalist for many years by that time, but I really had not much of an idea about the Chittagong Hill Tracts. I didn't know anything about the peace accord. I didn't know anything about militarization or all these, the kind of everyday racism that Bengalis have against indigenous communities. I was so completely unaware of all of these things. Um, so going there, seeing everything in person for the first time. I've never been to the Hill Tribes before. 2008 was the first time I went there with the Chittagong Hill Tribes Commission as a translator. So that kind of opened my eye to a lot of the things that we as a society are, um, kind of not aware or just don't want to see, and how important our involvement is to, bringing these things into light. So I would say that was kind of my journey. And then I've worked at the CHT Commission for 5 years, 6 years, sorry, from 2009 to 2015. While I was working there, um, you know, I've done a lot of work through the commission, but I also wanted to write more about it, and I think that kind of led me into academia. And here I am now. I did a master's and now doing a PhD.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really, really thoughtful, I would say, um, exploration of your journey, right? Um, My next question to you would be, were there key moments or individuals in your life who shaped your feminist perspectives and influenced your decision to pursue this path?
Okay, so yes. So there are several incidents and also several people who inspired me a lot. I think if that is what I understand your question is. Um, I think the Cholas Ritual case for me was a very big turning point, because my editor didn't want to give my name on the article on the byline, and that kind of brought forward, like, okay, why can we not talk about this? What is the problem with a man has been brutally murdered? Like, all of us as a society should be talking about it. Um, but So that, I think, was what brought me into like talking about the Chittagong Hill Tracts and also indigenous people in Bangladesh, and also like understanding how that it's something that affects so many people, and how to think about that in the context, in the larger context, in the larger political context of Bangladesh as well as the world. Um, so I think for me that was a big turning point. Um, personally, I think a lot of people I've worked with, because like I think in my family, I don't really have a lot of people who inspired me. Like I think I was being trained to, get married and have a typical family kind of situation. Um, but working with certain people, um, so I think in the at the Daily Star, I would say like the editor of the magazine, Asha Mehrin Amin. I think she was a very big influence, first of all. Um, but then when I started working with the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission, I met a lot of people who were working on different issues. Like, Sarah Hussein is a lawyer, and she works on so many different legal rights issues, like anything and everything that affects different communities, right? And she also showed like someone in her position, like you can have a lot of privilege and you can do nothing about it if you don't want to, but you can also use that privilege to get things done, to get important things done. So she was a very big influence, I would say, because she was nonstop. Like I've watched her for so many years, from 2009 to now. Like she doesn't stop. She's working on something all the time, and bringing about real changes in um, society, right? So I think she was a big influence. And then the other members as well, like Meghna Guha Thakurta, she works on issues at the very ground level. She doesn't work at the law level, but she works at the writing level, and she works at the level of helping people. Um, so and she's also a very inspiring person. So like when you personally interact with her, she's very inspiring. And then I would say Bina Di Costa. She's also a member, so she was a big influence. And then Rehnuma Ahmed, who is not a member of the CHC Commission, but I've worked with her on various different issues, and I think she also understands um, kind of a lot of the intersections of marginalization. So it's not just gender; it's also class and other factors which you know um, stop a person from being their whole self. I think she really understands and helps people in that way. Um, but in the hill tracks, I just met so many women, especially in the very remote areas, because they've seen it all. They've faced so much. They're just in a situation where they have nothing to lose. So actually, in my master's defense, I was asked that. Um, because I've interviewed a lot of the activists for my master's research. And so I was asked this question about, like, why did you just interview activists? You didn't go out and speak to the women in the village or the men in the village. And I didn't say it that time, but I wish I had, that they're not just activists as in a professional way that you think about in like Western society. They've been forced to become activists, and because of their own life experiences of being under surveillance all the time, and being told to stay home because you'll get abducted by someone or something like that, and being targeted not just for being a woman, but targeted for being from a different ethnic community. um so activism is not a professional thing for them. They are activists because they live in a certain place. So I think I think a lot of women who have come from those kinds of backgrounds was really, really inspiring for me.
Thank you, Hannah. We are really, really enjoying your feminist journey. My next question to you is, so you have worked extensively in rights-based advocacy, particularly with the International Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission. So what have been some of the most impactful experiences during your time there?
um So in terms of the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission, so I worked there for about 6 years, um, 2009 to 2015. I think the impactful thing was how much our work was, um, how much barriers we faced in doing our work. Um, so I started in 2009. And our work was, looking at land rights issues faced by the communities there, and like what the sources of conflict is. So we would visit places that, when some places were burned down or someone was attacked. So we take our team, the members of the CHC Commission, and we go there when you talk to the people and find out what's going on, come back to Dhaka, write a report, and then talk to the government, representatives of the government. We talk to other human rights organizations. We talk to the media. We talk to other journalists about what our findings are. So in 2009, so when I started working in 2009, that year we organized a mission, and this is the first year that Sheikh Hasina is in power. So these kind of things are very important. Um, 2009 was fine. We met up with a lot of the government ministers. Everyone met with us. Everyone talked to us, listened to us, took our reports, gave serious thought, had serious conversations, and was like mostly very approachable at all levels, like even like talking to the land commission chairperson, all the way up to the minister. Everyone was approachable, so we spoke to all of them. Things started just changing after that year. From 2010, actually 2010, um, we were hearing about some kind of trouble again in Sajek. So this is the second time. So 2008 there was a arson attack. In 2010 there was another arson attack, but this is after we were hearing about some trouble that was brewing in Sajik. So I took a group of lawyers and journalists and took them there so that they would come back and do a report, because we were getting frantic calls from people like something is happening, the Bengalis are doing something, they're threatening us and all that. So we took this a group of journalists and lawyers to talk to the people in Sajik. And then we came back, and 2 days within our coming back, there was another much bigger arson attack. And this time, like about 400 homes were burned down. So this was like, we were in shock because we had just been there 2 days ago. This was in February 2010. So this was like a horrific attack. And like right after that, they published. So this is the, I don't remember what name they published this in, but this is basically the intelligence agencies. They have all these strangely named publications. So they published a booklet about the CHT Commission and the kind of conspiracy we were doing against Bengalis, against the CHT. And even I think this Bangla newspaper published a cartoon where there are 5 hands that's separating the Chittagong hill tracts from the rest of Bangladesh. And one of the hands is CHT Commission. And then there's the European Union, the Christian missionaries, and UPDF JSS. So the two political groups that, the two indigenous political groups there. So we were all conspiring to separate the Chittagong hill tracts from the rest of Bangladesh. So this was, published in some time around 2010 or 11, right after that. So this was clearly, like trying to not let us do our work, basically. So that was 2010. And then 2011 was when Dipu Moni famously, declared that there are no indigenous people in Bangladesh. And also that year we did a research report on the situation of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. So one of our members, who was also a special rapporteur for the UN, did a report on the situation, and we presented it at the UN Permanent Forum for Indigenous Issues. And right after that, that was another big thing, because this was another conspiracy that the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission is doing with the indigenous people, and they're trying to separate the country. And then after the UN Permanent Forum, we had another mission in November. So we visited several places and talked to several people in the three hill districts. But when we went to Bandorbon, we weren't able to do anything, because once I arrived in Bandorbon, our group, when we arrived in Bandorbon, and I called up the hotel where we were going to stay, and I had done the booking of that hotel. When I called them up, they said, there's no booking in your name. I said, no, I booked. I spoke to you. It was confirmed. And they said, no, there's no booking. So obviously the intelligence agencies had told them not to cancel our booking. And then we were like, okay, but we're already here. We'll have to figure something out. But we have to go get to the meeting first, because we had a meeting with some people who had, who were working on land rights and who had lost their land. A lot of the victims were also going to come who had lost their land. So we arrived at a meeting room. Within like 5 minutes of us arriving there, about 20 people came in from outside. These are all intelligence agents. They're like plainclothes people, but they're all taking photos of all of us, taking photos, doing videos. And suddenly they just came into our room. And we obviously, after that, couldn't do any talking. So we had to leave. We left Bandarbon basically right after that because we realized we were now endangering the lives of those people who had come to talk to us. Um, so so that was 2011. And then we decided, okay, we can't really do these missions anymore. Between 2011 and 2014, there was various other things that they did to our work. They basically said the CHT Commission is not allowed to go to the hill tracks unless there are members of the government present in the meetings. And we're like, we can't have that because um, that we're endangering the lives of people there, very vulnerable situations. So we didn't go there. And then in 2014, we decided, okay, since it's a problem for the Bangladesh government that international members are, um, you know, they feel threatened by it, we'll just take the national members. So that shouldn't be a problem. We're all like citizens of Bangladesh, so we can go anywhere in Bangladesh, and that shouldn't be a problem for anyone when we can talk to anyone. So in 2014, in July, we went there. And that's when basically in Rangamati we were physically attacked. We were about to leave our um, hotel to go to, I think, another district. But suddenly there were like I don't know, hundreds of people on the roads, and Rangamati is like one road that goes all the way. There's no other way to get out. Um, so it's just like these hundreds of people suddenly appeared, and then there were a lot of journalists there as well. So they also heard that there was some kind of protest going on against us. So they came near our hotel room and started yelling at us, especially Sultana Kamal. So, and then we decided, okay, we just have to leave. We'll just leave, we'll leave, and we'll go to Dhaka or Chittagong at that time. And we were physically attacked, our car was attacked. So I think like the work at the CHT is like how much work we cannot do uh, that um, really explains how CHT is seen. It's really like now we see all this, the attack on the Adivasi activists in Dhaka and the students for sovereignty, because of course, being called indigenous or Adivasi is a threat to the sovereignty. And it's in the same line as how we were attacked, right? That, okay, this is a threat to the sovereignty of the country. So it really explains how the Chittagong Hill Tracts is seen, who is in control there. So basically, whatever political group comes to power, regardless of that, it's the military's interest there that is is basically defines how things will be done there, who will be able to do anything there, how things will be done. Everything is dictated by the priorities of the military. That I think was kind of the learning through working in the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission.
Thank you so much, Hannah, sharing for this like experiences. I've never ever heard about this. There are a lot of like incidents we haven't heard about these incidents, and we really need to make sure that like these are the incidents which are being archived and also being, at some point we need to like revisit them. And it's very important. That's why we're doing this oral history with you. And I really, really, really appreciate your effort and whatever the other folks have been doing for a very long time. It's very important that we do raise our voice and do the intersectional movements. So, So, how have feminist principles shaped your approach to advocacy and research, especially in complex contexts like the Chittagong Hill Tracts?
Um, so, hmm, that's a big question. Um, I think in terms of feminist principles, I would say, um, like if I think about the Chittagong Hill Tracts, um, it's how the state treats the indigenous communities there. So there's all kinds of um, forms of racism and ethno-nationalist sentiments um, that are stoked um, by the powers that be, by the state, and by those who, benefit um, from the indigenous people's land dispossession. So that's kind of a defining factor in how I think indigenous communities live, even those who live in the cities. So there are people who live in Dhaka, Chittagong, and not in the hill tracts, but how the state sees them is what this is how the state sees them. This is how the state treats them, and this is how I think people feel growing up in this is my country, this is my homeland, yet I am not being my identity is not being respected because I'm not Bengali. So that's kind of the defining factor. But within that, I think there is like women, indigenous women, face so much more. Because I think when I was working with the Chittagong Hill Tracts Commission, one of the things was we were monitoring the sexual harassment and um, rape cases in the hill tracts. And we found out that not a single rape case went all the way into conviction. So no one was ever convicted for a rape in the hill tracts. Now I know like rape, conviction in rapes is rare anyway. Like even in these countries, like right, North America, Western countries, anywhere, like rape is such a the rate of conviction is so bad. But in the hill tracts, it was zero, we found. Um, until like I think around 2017 or 18. I can't remember the year, but it was like much after I left, there was one man who was convicted. Um, so I think just living in that, knowing that if you are ever raped, nothing will ever happen to that person and to live in that way, like how do you live in that way, but you can't think about that all the time, right? But it is something that's at the back of my mind. Um um and like and I saw the Hill Women's Federation, both JSS and UPDF Hill Women's Federation, without their help, and there are some other NGOs also working in the hills, so women's rights NGOs. They are also amazing. The kind of work they do in the kind of environment that they exist in is quite amazing. But also these two Hill Women's Federation, whenever there was a rape, they would personally take them to the police station because when a girl or a woman is raped, she's not going to go to the police station. Her parents are sometimes terrified. They don't even want to talk about it. They just want to forget about it. So Hill Women's Federation, I've seen the way that they kind of work. It's just so inspiring that they come in, they take you physically and say, no, I will help you. I will be by your side to give you this support. Do not fear. But there is something to fear, but you do need someone to kind of tell you that no, you need to do this, that you need justice. So I was really amazed about how um how brave these women are, and they're so young. They're like in their 20s, and they're so brave. It's so that was very infectious. Like honestly, like in 2014, after the attack on us, there was another attack on me personally afterwards. 1 month after, I went there with my friend, and I was basically beaten up. Me and my friend, we Nasrin Kondokar, she's also in academia now. We went there, just we're hanging out, and we were, while coming back, we were beaten up. So after that incident, it was really um, quite traumatizing for me. Um, After that, after 2014, I actually didn't go to the hill tracks because it was so terrifying. And all that happened to me was they slapped us. And they slapped us and said, why did you come here? Ik kan ashtishken. Why did you come here? Um, so, but they would the ones the personal attack on me and Nasrin, that was carried out by intelligence agents. So they were very well trained. So they didn't touch us anywhere else in our body. You know that because men usually do, right? When they attack you. But they were very careful. They only slapped us on our cheeks and on the back. But that was still very rattling. And after that, I couldn't go into the hill track. So it's just this trauma that worked in me. Um, but then I think about, oh my God, these women who have faced so much more. They live there, their family lives there. They've been attacked, but they still continue to live there, continue to do the work. Um, so that is quite, um, it's awful that this is the situation that the Bangladeshi state has created for this region. Uh, but again, you kind of can't help but wonder what this courage, where does that come from?
Oh, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing these stories. I'm very, very touched. And yes, it is very, very much understandable that like that trauma you really do have and also carrying out, and there is no way you can go back, to relieve those traumas. And my solidarity towards you and your friend and everyone who worked in these situations. Um, so my next question would be to you, if I say that your research explores resistance and community mobilization. Can you explain how marginalized groups use tools such as petitions, protests, and negotiations to advocate for their rights?
Yeah, for sure. So, uh, so, so in my PhD research, I'm actually looking at written petitions. So that's, I was trying to think, okay, how do I talk about all the things that I want to talk about? What do I bring it down to? Where should I bring it down to? And I thought about, I've been part of a lot of petitions that indigenous communities have sent regarding various laws, policies, um, events, or violent attacks, everything that happens in the hill tracts. The starting point is a written petition. So it can come from various people. It can come from headmen and carveries. It can come from, um, the kind of um, lawyers and activists who work there. It can come from civil society members. And then even from the CHT Commission, we've organized this. And I worked with the Association for Land Reform and Development as well. They organize petitions. So petitions have become kind of a starting point for other things. All right, something just happened. We need to write a petition. We need to bring this to light. We need to talk about this. So I thought, like, because I've been part of this I want to, um, and also like my own experience of, I don't want to go too much into that incident, but in 2014, the International Crimes Tribunal, when they were doing the cases against the well, crimes against crimes during 1971, and David Bergman basically wrote about and pointed out the discrepancies, the targeted attacks on people who were, um, people who were part of this. Um, and then he was, and there was a case against him of conspiracy. I'm forgetting the exact term. Um, but anyway, so we gave a petition to basically support David Bergman and journalism, that everyone has the right to report about discrepancies in the legal system, the corruption, and everything. So 50 of us signed a petition and sent it to the media, basically saying that this is a harassment of not just David Bergman, but this is a harassment against journalism, of freedom of speech, of freedom of expression, of just freedom of people to know what's happening. So then we faced months and months of legal harassment. Um, um, I'm forgetting the term. It's called, basically you are disrespecting the court by that. And so they wanted to take legal action against us. So it was just a written petition that we sent, and now we were facing possible jail time. And wow, so that's the power of a written petition. So I'm just trying to explain like why written petitions, because of all these experiences that I had. Um, so in terms of the Chittagong Hill Tracts, I thought, oh, written petitions is kind of a starting point for many of these um, mm, uh, movements, many of these campaigns against a wrongdoing, a land dispossession, human rights violation, everything like that. So that's how I came into that. Um, but so I started thinking about why written petitions, and like how has activism in the Hill Tracts changed, because in the 1980s, it was an armed movement against the Bangladeshi, um, basically very discriminatory and racist policy of saying that you all become Bengalis, and that was famously said by Sheikh Mujib after after Bangladesh became independent. He said, "Just become Bengali," and the indigenous communities were not going to put up with that, especially, and M.N. Larma at that time, Manobendra Naran Larma, who was a member of the parliament, said that no, we're not Bengali, we're not going to become Bengali, you cannot do this to us. So that turned into an art movement for 2 decades. But you can't, like, it was a difficult fight at that times. The military carried out massacres. They raped a lot of women there, and basically in 1996 1997 they had to sign a peace accord, but nothing had changed in terms of the actual policy of the state. Military was still there. The settlers who were taken there to displace and to cause the land dispossession in that region, they were still there, and they were bringing in more people without having those land disputes resolved first. And this is where, like, I don't want to digress, but this whole recent the attack on Adivashi students and activists in Dhaka about like, why are we settlers? Why are we called settlers in our own country? No, we're not. Not all Bengalis are settlers. Bengalis who were taken through a specific transmigration program designed by the state to dispossess Jumma communities, they are settlers. Not all Bengalis are settlers. So this whole, the way that it is framed that, oh, Bengalis are all settlers, how dare they say that? This kind of misrepresentation of what people are talking about. Um, so, sorry, I digress now. I've forgotten what I was talking about. Petitions. Um, so, um, yeah, so there was an armed movement and then the peace accord, and everyone thought everything would be fine there, but it's not, and they're still using that um kind of the justification used for the military to stay there in that same way, and justification used to not resolve the land disputes. But now, the Jummas, the Adivashis there, they had surrendered the arms. And my research kind of looks at how this the activism has changed from armed resistance to more like um, to an appeal for recognition by the state. So this is really an appeal for recognition. Whatever, so those petitions that are being sent, um, they are trying to engage with the state. They are trying to say that um, you know, we want to be part of this state, but you need to also recognize the distinctness of the communities there. Yes, we're all Bangladeshis. We're all, part of Bangladesh, and we're proud of Bangladesh, but we're not Bengali, and we have distinct cultures, we have distinct way of life, we have distinct customary laws, and they are recognized in many other countries, and it can be done um, in this country as well. It's nothing is being taken away from Bangladesh as a result of um, this recognition. So, kind of how petitions show a change in the way that Jumas communicate with the state, that Jumas negotiate with the state, that they appeal to the state for recognition and uh, as equal citizens of the country. Um, so that's kind of what I'm looking at through my research.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. My next question to you is, so the feminist and rights-based movements in Bangladesh have gone through significant changes of over time, right? So how do you see these movements evolving, and where do you think they're headed?
Um, okay, so feminist movement in Bangladesh. Um, I don't think so. For me, because the feminist movement is not necessarily the research focus for me, but I have been part of it. So I think what I say will be my very partial view of the last 20 years in the way I experienced it, and I was part of it. So whatever I say, I might be missing out certain
Yes,
things. So I
absolutely.
just wanted to,
You can
yeah.
miss out, no worries. But it's just your, as a feminist, and as well, you have been part of this particular journey. So what's
Mhm,
your kind of like, perception? Would
mhm.
would love
Yeah,
to hear that. Yeah.
for sure. So yes, my perspective. Um, my God, so like I'm talking about, let's start from like my childhood. Like when I was, facing that kind of sexual harassment, being locked up at home, being told I can't go out and sing, I can't go out and play, sports is not for me. Um, at that time, I had no way of knowing that these messages that I was getting was wrong, that these were discriminatory, that these were a way of kind of um, not letting women and girls advance. So equality, getting rid of equality. So um, so at that time, there was no way for me to um, understand the bigger picture here. I mean, of course, we had newspapers. I read the newspaper all the time, but I don't remember much about reading about feminist anything, any kind of feminist stories or yes, we were told we have to study, go to school, but the basic message I received was school and then high education and then marriage and children. That that is your destiny. Um, so, but now things, I mean, in that sense, there's just so much information out there. There's so many sources of knowing how to um, I think how to think differently. Um, so so I think there's various ways that this has happened. Um, I mean, just generally, there's so much more information out there for girls, but there's also more harassment now. Like I think about how like in the digital space that girls um, and non-binary people uh, and people from the LGBT community, they are so much more harassed now than before, and it's so much easier to harass them. For us, like at least when we were home, we were definitely safe. um, but now the home is not a safe place because you are accessing things online and there's harassment um, on people from various sources. And it's impossible, no matter how much parental control you put, there's no way to, you know, kind of um, fight against it. If something of you is released into social media, it is done, it is irreversible, it is out there. We never had that. Whatever harassment, even if there was a case of a boyfriend, you know, doing some kind of sexual harassment act, it stayed within the two people. Now there are like all kinds of ways to do revenge porn and all that. That really terrifies me. Um, but I think that there's much more information out there. There are much more women out on the streets. There are, more women working. There are more stories about women achieving things in um, um, different professions, different positions, in sports, in anything and everything. So those stories are highlighted more in the media. So I think that really, really helps. That really, like that little girl who's sitting in her home and feeling worthless or whatever. Uh, she still has access to those kinds of things, and something lights up, and that's where inspiration comes from. So I think there's a lot of that, and I think like we've had so many um, amazing feminists in Bangladesh um, who are so outspoken. The July movement was amazing. So many women came out, but then they were sidelined, right? They were like, okay, you've done your part. Now it's time for the men to take over. Um, And like at any kind of public event, even now we have to talk every time. Like, okay, where is the rest of the representation? Where are the women in this table? Where are the people from different genders? I don't know. Like in Dhaka, I think that's a little more difficult to even talk about what different genders or what other. Um, the LGBT community is kind of um, invisibilized. It's you can't talk about that. So, and I think that is where a lot more work needs to be done because yes, we're talking about women, but we still like I have friends who are adult in their 30s, they're lesbians, but their friends don't know that they're lesbian. Like this is where, like, even friends who are in socially progressive um, backgrounds, they don't dare to tell their own friends that um, they are lesbian, that they're living together. They see them living together, but they're like, okay, yeah, whatever, two friends living together. So just living in that fear, not being able to even talk about your own partner. So I think that is one arena where we need to do so much work, but it's also so difficult to do that work. I don't even know how many more lives will have to be taken before you can even talk about it. Like the death of Zulha's really changed fundamentally something in all of us who we were like, oh, okay, now we can talk about this. Yeah, Rubban, you have a magazine. There's all this, like, we can talk about the LGBT community finally, and then suddenly, okay, no more. That's it. Um, but I think that just women coming out and on the streets and in different spheres of work and doing so well, um, I think that has been very amazing. But I think like there's still a lot of misunderstanding, like even within feminist circles about specific issues. And there are many things, but I'll talk about one thing because this is one thing that has affected me personally. So I want to talk about just highlight that, but there may be other things that I'm not aware of. So I mean, there's been this, a lot of feminists I found that talk about like sexual harassment, sorry, not sexual harassment, like domestic violence. This is a big issue in Bangladesh, right? Domestic violence, and how do you even like what to do about it, like especially domestic violence when you have a child and you have to get out, you have to divorce, and the problems associated. And these are not just legal problems, these are social problems. And I've heard a lot of women in our feminist circles, they're angry with these women because they're not leaving their husbands, they're not leaving the families. Like, why don't you just leave? You have a degree, you have a job, and you can't leave your husband. That's your problem. But this is where, like, actually, me and a couple of my feminist um kind of uh friends have been talking about this, about how um like getting out of an abusive situation is not that easy. And like there are so many things that come to play because a lot of these women, when they talk about domestic violence and why don't they leave, they they come from very privileged backgrounds. Like they have very supportive network, their parents are supportive, they're in certain situations that um they don't understand people, women who come from um who have they face so much trauma throughout their childhood and adolescence and adulthood. That trauma, I don't think there's a very good understanding of how trauma works, um and how trauma dictates um decisions that are taken by women about their own lives. Like there can be women who they're writing about feminist theory, they're writing about, they're reading all this feminist literature and everything. But when it comes to your own personal trauma, um, how your body responds, how your mind kind of works through it. There's not a very good understanding. So I still think that there's a lot of work to be done to understand women who come from, um, you know, so the word intersection comes into mind now, and it's gender, um, the ethnicity, class, but also family background, family upbringing, and how that works into um, that understanding. So I think what I'm trying to say is that there are still, I think, a lot of lack of understanding of um, the kind, how trauma works, and how within feminism, within feminist circles, I think we need to do a lot more work on um, how we understand women, um, and feminism.
Thank you, Hannah. We are like in our last question, and thank you so much for sharing a lot of with us. So, my final question to you is that so what is your vision for the future of feminism and advocacy in Bangladesh, especially in terms of addressing systemic inequalities and empowering marginalized communities?
Okay, my vision. um, so I would say that, I mean, I'll come back to the July uprising, which kind of um, brought into focus a lot of the things that um, women face in our society. That um, women and non-binary persons, I would say, that this invisibilization that people face, that women face, we really have to fight our way into everything. So even like, so when I was working as a journalist at the Daily Star, it was the main paper. So the reporting section was really dominated by men. There were hardly, I don't think there were any women reporters for the main paper at that time. Now there are. Um, so the spaces are very dominated by heterosexual, heteronormative male. It's a very heteronormative, masculine, very toxic masculine, um, masculine in its toxic form, not, there are obviously different forms of masculinity. So in its toxic form, it's is still what dominates these spaces, workspaces and political spaces. So in terms of like offices and again, going back to July Revolution, um, like all the people who were involved in it, they brought about this change, um, but after Sheikh Hasina fled, um, somehow these women were invisibilized, and people had to push them into these things. Like, okay, you have a talk tomorrow, and there are 5 men. You need to have a woman. Okay, push that woman into that position. Um, and this happens so many times, and it's like, why do we have to do this again and again? Like, why do we have to push our way into it? The men just organically form part of that table, right? But for women, they have to be pushed. And it's always when you're talking about forming a group, you have a list, you form this list, and then like, oh, we need to have a woman. It's like it's not organic. It's kind of artificial, and this so. so we have to fight a lot for these spaces. And I think the vision for me is that we don't want to have to fight to be in these positions. Like we're already doing our fighting every day to get into those wherever we are, like teachers, journalists, political commentators, activists. We're all doing that work every day. And we have to work more than men, even to get to those positions. And after that, when you want a group to be formed by um, people who are working on this issue, why is it that we have to again do more work to get to that table, to be taken seriously as a thinking person? Um, so so I think, yeah, so I think it's that. Like I want to not do that work because I'm also already like, by me I mean like others like me who are um you know having to fight to come to these spaces.
Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your story and insights with us today. As the very first guest of the Bangladesh Feminist Oral History Project, your journey sets a powerful tone for the series. Your reflections will undoubtedly inspire those who watch or listen to this episode, as well the future generations who turn to this archive for guidance and understanding. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this first episode. Stay tuned for more discussions as we continue to document the voices shaping feminist movements in Bangladesh. Thank you again, Hannah, and thank you all for being part of this journey.
Thank you so much for having me, Anoy.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really, really appreciate it. And I really learned a lot of, you know, stories from you, and that will inspire me a lot. So thank you so much.